Okay, good evening once again. Welcome to the post bylaws class. Let me get the screen set up. Okay. Tonight's subject, post-constitution bylaws. First thing I need to point out is that we will be only discussing bylaws. Constitution is basically your articles of incorporation that are filed with the Secretary of State when you're post incorporated. We don't have separate constitution for the post. Department's the same way. Their constitution is articles of incorporation. So we'll only be talking about bylaws. If you currently have constitution and bylaws in your post bylaws, when you go to work on them, you'll have to take and roll them into just bylaws. Make them just that. Please do not send us constitution and bylaws when you submit, because we'll have to return it to have you roll it into one document. Wait a second, I got okay. Learning objectives. By the end of this presentation, you'll be able to know how important the bylaws are of the American Legion, be able to identify resources available to you for writing your post bylaws, better understand some of the key areas of post bylaws, know how to certify your post bylaws, and know how to submit them to department. I'm going to throw in a couple extra things, and the idea is part of what I advertise out there was to help you folks find the easiest, slickest way to get your bylaws established. So we will be discussing that area towards the end of the presentation. First thing I want to do is I need to go through the what's basically in the sample bylaws that are available online, so you'll know what you can and cannot do. The sample, you are not bound to follow it ad infinitum or to the T. You can incorporate those things which are unique to your post. You can even start over and write a whole different thing if you want to. We can't prevent you from doing it. However, hang on a second. I got a glitch. Okay. Okay. This is basically some of the importance of the bylaws. They give you empowerment. They tell you how to conduct your post business. They give you structure for the post leadership. They protect the integrity of your post operations, protect the assets of your post. They assure that your post will operate in a constructive manner, and they keep the post in sync with the other parts of the American Legion. Even though you are an independent corporation as a post, you are still subject to the structure and rules of the American Legion, Department of California, and the national organization. So a lot of what we do is guided from that. Just a little background, everything flows from national to department to post in the way of bylaws. National before natural is Congress who did the federal law to establish the American Legion in the first place. So it stands to reason that on a post level, it feeds back up to department and national. So the post is obligated to follow the rules of the department and national. When we review your bylaws in the commission, we're primarily concerned about that you're not in conflict with department or national bylaws. Our main concern is that you're following, that they're constructive, that they're useful, and that they don't create any problems for you. Everything in California must conform to the California Corporate Code for nonprofit organizations. I wouldn't worry too much about that statement because I would say 95% of you aren't going to come close to violating that. But if you ever come across something that you're in question about, you can contact your judge advocate on up to the department judge advocate and ask. They will look into it for you. We have a little bit of familiarity in the commission about California Corporate Code, but we really don't go streaming through it looking for things. All bylaws must be reviewed by the commission every 7 years or less. That's in the department bylaws now. So that's why a lot of you are here, is because you're kind of maybe a little bit past the 7 year mark. There's I think one post out there that goes back to 1942. So we're trying to help everybody with this get themselves in place, because what is happening now is that because it's a department requirement, your post is on administrative probation. In order to get off administrative probation for bylaws, you have to establish new bylaws or update your current bylaws. So there's two ways. You can redo new ones or update your current ones and submit those. Please do not send us your old bylaws and say what's wrong with them. You need to go through the effort to go through and find out what might be wrong with them. And your best source for that type of comparison is the sample bylaws. However, the bottom line will be the department and national bylaws have the last word. And who's ever, I need to request that everybody mute yourself unless you're talking. So I should be the only one with a microphone right now. John, can you mute yourself? Thank you. And one last comment is bylaws take precedence over Robert's Rules of Order. I do get some arguments that, well, Robert Rules says this. If your bylaws say something different, your bylaws take the precedence for it. Robert's Rules was established to fill in those gaps for those areas that the bylaws do not cover for parliamentary procedures. Is there any questions on that? Okay. Where's your starting point? The sample bylaws. Guys, these things are compliant. They're in line with everything. We have worked for, they're right now, what we have online is an evolutionary process that has taken these through a four-year time period at the work of the commission to create them, to make them as simple as we can, easy for you to follow, and that they have the pertinent information into them. They're logically arranged, and when you stay close to the sample, you're making it easy for yourself, your posts, and you make it really easy for the commissioner that is looking at your bylaws, reviewing them, so they can catch those things that need to be caught. You're not obligated to do it again, but really keep it in line with that. Will really simplify things. The way they're set up now, they're basically plug and play. There's a few areas that you can just put the names in of your posts and a little bit of information, and then you could read those at 2 meetings and get them back past you. But we'll cover some areas where you can go put specific information that's unique to your post, because the idea isn't for us to cage you into something. We need to keep them loose enough so that your post can do the things they need to do. One thing you want to do is you want to keep a lot of specific things out of your bylaws, like what time the bar opens, or what day do we meet, or the exact amount of our dues. Things like that go in house rules or operation procedures, or your policies, whatever you have established. These bylaws are developed in a sense to give them the test of time, so they will last for a period of time. That we don't have to, because if you put a specific meeting location and date, place in there, and you change it, and it's in your bylaws, you have to do an amendment to your bylaws and process it through the commission in order to bring it up to date. You know, and above all, they need to be readable. Keep the jargon down. You know, everybody needs to be able to read the bylaws and understand what they say. It's a document for the post. And the bylaws serve you. You don't serve the bylaws. They serve you. So they need to be, you know, able to meet, do the things you wanted to do. Now, in order to find, how many of you, is there anybody out there who's not been on the department website? No? Okay, so you open up the calegion.org. On the resource library, there's a thing that says resource library. You hit on that, a window will drop down, and you'll see a thing that says commissions and committees. Go in there, and then you can get the link to the post, to the Constitution bylaws page. There's also a link to the post bylaws. All post bylaws and district bylaws, department and national bylaws are all on that page. You can go in there and get anybody. Whatever's on that page is the most recent approved set by the commission. So whatever's in there, if you have something that's newer, you need to contact me, let me know, we can discuss it. But if they're older than 7 years, it's going to be a short conversation, because you'll need to replace them anyway. This is what it looks like inside once you get up. There's a section up in the upper left-hand corner. As I said before, Department Constitution bylaws, national sample bylaws. There's a guide for writing post bylaws, which does need to be updated a little bit, and a guide for writing bylaw amendments. There's also an example for the district bylaws in there, and we recently did an overhauling of the district bylaws this past year. So that's pretty much up to date and comprehensive as well. Also on that page is a Constitution Bylaws Commission operational guide. If you guys ever get curious about wanting to serve on the commission, or you want to know what we do or how we do it, pull open that document and it'll give you the description of what we do and how we operate. Okay, the first four articles pretty much fall into place. There's not too much you really need to do to the first four articles, so we're not going to spend any time on those. And then now we're talking about the sample bylaws. This is what this presentation is following the sample that's online most currently. In Article 5, this is where it starts to get interesting. The officers of the post shall be the commander, vice commanders, adjutant, finance officer, chaplain, judge advocate, and so on. All your officers that are in the post need to be named in here. The four officers you absolutely have to have in order to operate the post in accordance with the department bylaws is a commander, a first vice commander, an adjutant, and a finance officer. The adjutant and finance officer can be one and the same person, but though that is not necessarily recommended, but it can be. But the commanders and vice commanders, that's the only job that they can have. Now, if they do additional duties, hint, hint, that's one thing, but they cannot hold any other position formally in the post. The next statement, the elective officers of the post shall be the commander, vice commanders, and 3 members of the executive committee. Now, your executive committee might vary in size. Some have 2, some have 4 or 5. There's a post out there that has like 9 executive committee members at large. It's a large post, needless to say. So those positions must be elected. There's no choice. And when I say vice commanders, that's the first, second, and every once in a while I'll run into somebody who'll put third vice commander, and they'll be appointed, and then they can't be appointed. They have to be elected like anybody else because they are in that direct line of succession to being a commander. Then you state the following officers that be appointed. Generally speaking, the post commander will appoint the other officers, the appointed ones. Some posts, and not very many, will require ratification by their executive committee. Most do not. And here's the nice part is beyond those ones that are mandatory to be elected, you can decide which ones you want to be elected or appointed. If you want your judge advocate or your adjutant or your finance officer, you want that person, those people to be elected, then you can make them elected. Just make sure it's stated in the bylaws. And again, just only the commanders and vice commanders that's the only job they can do. Now, nomination process. This process is set up in order to preserve the rights of the membership so that they will have an opportunity to either run for an office or nominate somebody for an office. So prior to the meeting that you're going to have a nomination, the previous meeting, you have to give notice at the meeting. Some posts will require that you also do a written notice at least 10 days in advance. That can be done. That's not mandatory. But you have nominations at 2 regular meetings in separate months. 2 meetings. That is done in order to create, again, the option for people to be able to participate in the process. The officers are elected or appointed for 1 year. You cannot set up your bylaws to say, well, officers will be for 2 years. Once in a while we run into that. They have to be 1 year at a time. That's in the department bylaws. The only thing that supersedes that is the executive committee members at large. They can serve up to 3 years. Now, in the executive committee positions, you can either have a rotation system where you elect one each every year if you have 3 of them, or you can elect all new ones every year. My post elects the executive committee, a fresh executive committee every year. However you want to set that up, that's up to you. The commanders must win by a simple majority. That means over 50%. Not 50% plus 1, over 50%. The other positions can be by what we call plurality, which means if you have, let's say, 4 people running for one office, the one with the most votes wins it. Or you can make those other offices by simple majority. Most people will stay with the idea of plurality, especially when you're talking about electing committee members, executive committee members. And if you're doing more than one at a time, you almost have to use plurality on that unless there are separate nominations. But the other ones you can do by plurality or by simple majority. Got any questions? Got any questions so far? Okay, good.
Yeah, hey, Mark, I do have a question.
Yes.
It's John Lucio. So we talked about this before. When you talked about the officers and the other positions that they can perform, I believe you had one time told me that they cannot be on the committees, like they can't be on the finance committee or the building committee or other committees.
There are minor restrictions. Most of it has to do with the audit. But as far as serving on the committee, generally speaking, the commander is automatically a member of each committee. What's that called, Diane?
It's ex officio.
Yeah, ex officio. That's right. One of those $3 words I learn and forget because I turned old. But they're essentially, yeah, the commander is ex officio member of the committee. So, and the commander really shouldn't head a committee. Committee should be head by the membership. You want to engage your post members. You want them doing the committees, and you want them being involved and doing those things. And you can serve on multiple committees. There's no limitation or anything like that. So I mean, and some posts are small enough where you almost have to have officers that serve on committees if you're going to have a committee or two. You know, so sometimes the numbers of your post membership has a lot to say with what you can do and how much you can spread out. But there's no limits and no requirements.
Okay, and then
in
addition to that question,
yeah.
So if you do have officers who are part of committee, what if that committee is made up of officers and non-officers that are all related to each other? Are there conflicts of interest involved at that level?
That's something your post has to work out. You know, on a legal basis, for the purpose of bylaws, I don't think there's anything much we can really say about it. I did run into one set of bylaws that did have a limitation of having blood relatives on the same committee or something. I can't remember. And I know which post it is. I can remember it, but generally you don't run into it. But you know, when you start getting into the politics of who can do what and who's at conflict with what, and the post needs to conduct itself in a really reasonable fashion. Unfortunately, we are a volunteer organization, and sometimes egos get in the way of that. So if you think you have a need to make that limitation, you can put that in your bylaws. But unless it's in there, there's really not much you can do about it. Again, I really wouldn't recommend it, but that's up to your post. Any other questions? Okay. Glad you brought that up. That was a good question. Okay, all post positions shall be by a secret ballot. Now, you can hang tight on this one because we're doing we're looking at a change. We're doing a rewrite, basically a rearrangement of the department bylaws at the convention this year. And we're removing the requirement of the secret ballot. A post should be able to determine how they want to elect their members. But right now, the department bylaws do specify a secret ballot. You know, it's whatever you guys need to do to get your business done, but you should follow your bylaws. A simple majority of votes required to elect the commander and the vice commander. Okay. Well, I don't think I already covered that. On secret ballots too. Oops, wait a second. Let me back it up. Secret ballots must be retained for 30 days by the post adjutant. Put them in an envelope, seal them, and stuff them away for 30 days in case somebody contests the election. Now, the department bylaws require that you have a provision for big positions that are open. There's a couple of ways a position become open. Somebody could pass, move out of town, quit. And sometimes officers they just stop coming. And if an officer misses so many meetings, and that'll be in your bylaws, then when you have an opening come up, then you replace that officer position in the next meeting with an advance notice given to the membership of the post. Now, if it's an appointed officer, that's not a problem because an appointed officer can just be replaced with another appointment. Though I would inform your post if you're doing that. And remember, anytime you change the construction of the construct of your officers, you have to submit an officer certification form to the department. And make sure you put everybody on the form. Just don't send in a form with just one person in one position on there, because if you send that in there, that form supersedes everything else, and they're gonna think you don't have anybody running the shop. So
Okay, I have a
anyway,
question.
elected officers do have to be replaced by elected. They cannot be appointed for replacements. A commander can put somebody in a position temporary in order to take care of a task. But as far as having formal power of the position, they have to be replaced by an election.
Mark?
Yes.
Jim Eubanks. I keep putting my hand up.
I'm
It keeps
watching this
disappearing. But
webinar, well, I'll come.
I'm sorry. I'm having trouble. Because I have them on full screen, I can't see everybody's picture, so.
okay, so the question I had was, or the comment was possibly explaining to them about an uncontested office, and if it's a secret ballot, the proper way of actually executing that. Because generally you just have the adjutant cast a single ballot. But he has to cast that ballot because it's a secret ballot, correct?
Okay, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, can you hear me now, Mark?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I have a hearing deficit that involves the ability to distinguish sounds sometimes.
I was just saying about pointing out the intricacies of a non-contested office and when you have a secret ballot and the proper way of going about dispensing of that.
Okay. We are also putting a provision in the department bylaws that's going to allow the commander, uncontested offices, the commander will be able to declare those positions filled by acclamation. In fact, you could technically, you can put that in your bylaws now if you want to. And that way, I know what you're saying, because sometimes if there's an uncontested position, then you have the adjutant cast one ballot for each person that's uncontested, so that it's a written secret ballot. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
actually saying that for the benefit of some of those.
No, I'm not seeing the hand, so if anybody needs to ask a question, don't hesitate when I'm not talking to go ahead and say, may I ask a question, or just, jump in. We don't have that many people on the call anyway, so. Okay, finance. Finance is one of the most critical sections of your bylaws. I can't express that enough. I've seen bylaws come in without anything on finance. Seen a lot of them come in with no appropriation shall be made without first referring the same to the finance committee for a report therefrom, and that's all they put. You want to protect your assets, and there's five sections or 5 points to a good finance section. So you want to be able to make sure that you protect those things, and there's requirements to that. So first, of course, the first thing you want to do if you're going to make a motion to spend some money. Yeah, it's a good idea to run it past the finance committee and make sure you got the money to spend. And even at a meeting, and if something comes up before the meeting, our finance officer should be asked, do we have the money in order to cover that? That should be part of the discussion phase of a motion. But not referring it to in advance does not take away an individual's right to make a motion at a meeting. You have a right to make a motion in a meeting, and that's a membership right. And I'm real big on membership rights. So next, the executive committee shall prescribe a form in which the financial records shall be kept using standard accounting practices. You guys, you're responsible for the well-being and the care. The executive committee is the well-being and care of the finances and the resources of the post. So make sure that you have a good system in place that people can easily follow and work with at your finance officer. For a lot of posts, it's going to be pretty simple. It'll be as simple as balancing a checkbook. Now, the fiscal year the post shall be, and you put the dates in there. That's not a drop dead absolute gotta have in there, but it's again something that should be in there. And the reason why is because you're going to have to do the post audit once a year, and the post audit is based on the previous fiscal year. All post expenditures, regardless of what conveyance for prior approval, shall require 2 signatures. Now, a lot of people think that means that 2 signature checks. That is one way that you can do it. However, when you make a motion on the floor of a meeting to pass something or to make an appropriation, it goes into the minutes of the meeting, and the minutes are signed by the adjutant. Your three most important documents in your post are your minutes to your meetings, your financial records, and your bylaws. Those have to be squared away. So when you goes in the minutes and the finance and the adjutant signs the minutes, that's your first signature. Then when the finance officer writes the check, that's your second signature. One way or another, you should have two people aware of where that money is going and when it goes out. That's to keep those who can't be trusted from doing things. Yes. Go ahead,
If you look back
Chris.
up on the finance committee here, the fiscal year, most of it is July 1st to June 30th. But yet we have to have the reports in by November of our financial report. Why can't we coordinate everything to coincide? Financial report go in, the 990 in, stuff like that. Otherwise, you're going to end up doing two audits, which is fine.
There's two things about that. The first thing is you're not bound to use a 1 July to 30 June fiscal year. You can establish your fiscal year however you want. There's quite a few posts that have a January to December fiscal year. Whatever it is, the audit is done on the previous full fiscal year. So when you do an audit in September, October, and your fiscal year is July to June, that previous year is what you're doing it on. So let's say you're going to do an audit for 2020, September 2024. That means that you're going to be auditing the fiscal year that started in July 2023 and ended in June 30th, 2024. So you're doing the previous completed year, fiscal year.
But yet the 990 is due in to national by 15 November. Does that only include the past fiscal year or from
Yeah, just the previous
July?
fiscal year? Anything that's happened on the current fiscal year, you don't report on that. It's just the previous full completed fiscal year. And remember, and you're also just certifying that the audit was done. And I'll explain more about that in a couple of minutes.
All right, thank you.
Okay. The next thing is emergency expenditures. Everybody has things that happens between meetings. Some posts are very open to helping out veterans between meetings. My post does it. When I was commander, I was authorized up to $300 a month if I wanted to for help veterans that were in need. Or you might have a building that needs repairs on a continuous basis or anything else. So you want to put in their amount of money that you're allowed to spend on an emergency basis between meetings. Basically, you want to make sure you let two other executive committee members know what you're doing. And then obviously you report it at the next meeting. But anything you spend in between on an emergency expenditure has to be reported has to be part of the finance report that's given by the finance officer to the post. Okay, here's the audit part section. This used to be in the appointments section of the post bylaws. We moved it up to finance for some strange reason. The post shall complete the examination of his financial records by October 1st and submit the certification of financial audit by November 15th. There's a few posts that come in a little bit late because they have large amounts of cash that they deal with. We have $1 million posts out there. Most of us are not $1 million posts. But you only have to certify, again, you're just certifying that the audit was done. If the post gross annual revenue is less than $50,000, you can have 3 members of your post do the audit who are not part of the finance committee. That was the restriction I was going to referring to, that as far as like the members of the finance committee or the officers that handle funds cannot be a member of the audit committee. It has to be somebody other than people who handle funds or any member of the finance committee. So you go over the books, you examine them, and then you certify it. If the post has a gross annual revenues of $50,000, and that is $50,000 gross, not net, gross, pre-tax, then you have to have your books examined by a bookkeeper or certified public accountant, and a copy of their report goes in with a certification of financial audit. Beyond that simple thing that you'd make less than 50 or more than 50,000, the department has no need to know how much money you got in your bank. That's not what the purpose of this is. It's none of their business, and they have no need to do it unless something comes up and there's fraud. And they're going to stick their nose in it. Any questions? Okay, excellent. Executive committee. This is this often misunderstood creature of entity. This particular section of the bylaws, Article 9, they state the purpose and function of the executive committee. And basically, the executive committee manages the business of the post. Okay. They pay the bills, they make sure the building's in good repair, they make sure that they do research on activities, or they set up, or they do the steps getting post activities together, those type of things. They do not make the decisions for the post. You can have them make the decisions for the post if you want to. We can't stop you from doing that. Bad idea. We try to discourage posts from letting the executive committee decide where the money is going to go. So basically, this executive committee, one of the things they do, they make recommendations to the post membership. If somebody submits a resolution for a bylaw change to the post bylaws, they make a recommendation. They don't determine whether or not it passes. If they want to spend some money, if you want to give $500 to scouts, they can make a recommendation. They can make a recommendation on anything that's coming up to the post. And when I say when they make a recommendation, it's by a vote of the executive committee, which means that the post commander cannot override the executive committee. If your executive committee votes to do something, to make a recommendation on something, then the commander has to follow that. He or she has to support that decision. It's not a dictatorship. This section also identifies the fact that the post membership does approve what is done, the officer assignments within the committee. And one thing I want to point out here too is you see 3 words and 2 of them are crossed out, or three entities: executive committee, board of directors, and executive board. I have actually seen all 3 of those terms used in one set of bylaws referring to the same group of people. You have an executive committee. The department has an executive committee. The national organization has an executive committee. They may function as the board of directors. And I have one set of bylaws that came across today that made a reference to the executive committee functioning as the board of directors. And I had to change their wording a little bit before I kicked them back. But they are not a board of directors or an executive board. Make sure you spell that out all through your bylaws as an executive committee. Things should be spelled out in the bylaws. Acronyms, abbreviations, it's not the best thing.
Hey, Mark, question for you.
Yeah.
So sometimes this gets a little confusing. We have an executive committee made up of the elected officers, plus those 3 people whose titles are actually executive committee.
Right.
Those 3 people, do they have any special function besides just being additional executive committee members?
No. They are just what they basically, their function is they are members at large that are representing the interests of the post membership, aside from the officers. That assures you have 3 or 4 or 2, whatever many people you have in your you have from your post membership in general that are there to make sure that the rest of them do what they're supposed to do. It's as much a balancing factor as it is giving input and helping to make the decisions for the post on what to recommend. That is one of the reasons why you can take, they can serve up to 3 years. Okay, so Article 9, Section 1, the executive committee shall consist of a minimum of 3 members. Again, my post has 2 for that size. Some have more, but it generally has a commander, vice commander, and the adjutant. Some posts put in their executive committee all elected officers. Some posts put all officers.
Mark, you have a hand, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Yes, going back here, it says that the executive committee basically runs the post. They're in charge of the post. And then as they present at the general membership, then the general membership can vote on things that the executive committee has voted and approved on.
Okay. Executive committee can make recommendations, but they cannot take and invest your money of your posts. But if your bylaws are written right, you can give them that power, but it has to be stated in the bylaws. But the executive committee, when you say they run the post, they're managing the affairs of the post. They're not the leadership. They're a leadership in a sense, but they are not in charge of the post. They can't take away the post membership right to decide where to invest your things, what activities to approve, what not to approve, what rules to approve.
That's true, but they are acting as the CEO and so forth, secretary, and the VPs of the post here. So
Correct.
everything's gonna run through the E-committee and then voted on, and then from there brought to the membership at the membership meetings.
Okay. Let me give you an example. Your post authorizes an expenditure.
Mhm.
Okay. Executive committee are the one that's going to make the purchase or expend the money. There may be 2 or 3 different ways of spending the money or acquiring what the post has agreed for them to do. They can make the decision on how to get that item. What they can't do is decide whether or not to buy the item itself. That's decisions made by the post. But how that money is managed and how they achieve that goal, that's their decision.
Correct. They want to buy a grill,
Yeah.
and the grill costs $600. The executive committee approves the type of grill to purchase, and then at the membership meeting, they bring it up here. The executive committee has approved the purchase of $600 for this type of grill.
Uh-huh.
I make a motion to approve it. It's second, discussion from membership, and then it's reread again and then approved by membership.
Correct. And then the executive committee goes out and buys the grill.
Right.
That's correct.
So therefore, things got to be brought up to the executive committee. If not, then how can the executive committee go through stuff with the finances and everything else to make sure that the fund stuff aren't wasted and stuff, and then bring it up at the general membership meeting? Plus, again, I agree, members can bring up anything at the general membership meeting.
Right.
That's the idea.
Most of the times, it's been my experience, most of the times there are things that come up have to do with like, okay, Boy Scouts will make a presentation for an Eagle Scout project. And you want to give a little bit of money to that. I haven't seen an instance where somebody walks in off the street at a post meeting and says, I want to spend $10,000 on a new flagpole, a solar powered flagpole for our flags, and then vote on it, where they actually could have. The commander can say, well, you have to entertain the motion, but if the discussion gets on how the commander says, I'm going to, can't remember the term they use, but he's going to put a hold on the motion and let the executive committee go out and do the research.
Yeah, he's going to table it for the executive committee to do research and then bring it back up at the next meeting.
And then they bring it back to the post, and then you vote on it. That's
Refer
what
to committee. Refer to the
They
committee.
may, just a suggestion, they may refer that to committee to deal with it also.
correct.
Okay,
Some larger posts do have committees that deal in specific areas, especially when dealing with the 4 pillars.
Each
Okay,
two.
thank you.
Hey,
Hey,
Mark.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Mark, Scott here. I understand the conversation that we just had about kind of the one-time purchases, special purchases. But I'm assuming that this procedure does not apply for the routine expenditures of the light bill, the gas bill, pay the liquor distributor for the bar supplies, things like that.
At the start of the year, you're supposed to put together a budget for the year. All those expenditures for those things should be rounded out or mentioned in the budget. Obviously, if something's going to go over budget, you have to take it back to post membership. But you can also take and pass. You can also make a motion and pass that they will take and pay those bills. If that's a responsibility, those things need to be taken care of. And that's the executive committee. You're not going to bring the gas bill back to the post membership and determine whether or not PG&E is overcharging you for your gas.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting to, that there's certain bills that are obvious that you're going to pay.
Right.
Okay.
Recurring bills, yeah, and they take care of those things. When I'm talking about expenditures on things that are beyond what's in the budget or what's required.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving along. Regular meetings of this post shall be held in the date, time, and location prescribed by the post executive committee and approved by the vote of the membership. This is where it used to say the post will meet on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. at 222 Barway, Pasadena. Okay. You put this in there instead, and then you can take, if you change your time, date, and location, the executive committee can make a recommendation and the post votes on it. The executive committee just can't change the meeting date itself. This protects the right of the membership for self-determination. So you can use a statement like this, because if you put those specific dates and date location in there, you have to take and make an amendment to your post bylaws every time you change anything on where you meet. Okay. A quorum in a general membership meeting must be at least 5 members. That's what the department bylaws read. Okay. You can have more. I had a post turn in a set of bylaws. They had 23 people required for a post meeting. We had a discussion about it and they brought it down to about 12. But anyway, some posts will take and will require that so many officers have to be. I actually had a post put in their bylaws that they had to have 7 elected officers at their post meeting to have a quorum when they only had 6 elected officers in the first place. So talk about a catch-22 for never having a meeting. But anyway, and that's why we review and we look for stuff like that in the commission. But basically, you want to keep that a reasonable number. You know, you can say 5 members, 2 of which must be an elected officer, that type of thing. You can add to it, but you can't distract. You can't make it through just 3 members. It takes 15 people to set up a post, but only 5 quorum at a meeting to maintain the post. As long as you have 5 people at every meeting and you're doing the business of the American Legion, your post is viable. Okay. Regular meetings may be rescheduled upon notification in writing to all members prior to the beginning of the month in which the meeting has been changed. Advance warning, they want advance warning. If you know something's coming up, let them know the previous month. My post has done this twice where we changed the meeting date. In the last, let me see, 14 years I've been in this post. Virtual meetings. COVID came along. Nobody had any means for virtual meetings. Everybody panicked and said, oh no. 3 people on the executive committee, 2 of which are on this call, got into the California Corporate Code. We discovered that yes, you can have virtual meetings in place of regular meetings. We leaned on that. So without this statement in your post bylaws, you can have virtual meetings if you want. However, it's better to have this in your bylaws because somebody's going to raise a ruckus if you do this because they don't want to do it virtually. So the post has the option to meet electronically, and this is a very nice section that Diane DePries wrote and pretty much covers everything. So that, and it doesn't have to be an emergency in order to do that. If you have a good reason for wanting to do a meeting virtually, just at least 10 days notice, guys, and let them know. The idea was when COVID hit, my post did not miss a meeting. 14 years I've been at that post. The only meetings we don't have is on Christmas because we meet on the 4th Tuesday, and we're not going to have a meeting on Christmas Day. Not happening. Okay. Duties of the officers. These are not well defined. These are very generalized statements. They're not like well defined. Take out the trash, mop the floors, and restock the candy machine. But basically, in the duties of the officers, you want to say what they do and do what they say. Okay. When you look at this, yes.
Yeah. So I got a question going back to the meetings and conflicts with the executive committee. So you had talked about the executive committee can take things and table them, discuss them before they get put to the membership. If a bylaw states in the meetings, I'm going to read exactly from my bylaws, that the post at any meeting may consider and pass upon any matters, irrespective of whether such matters have been previously considered by the executive committee. Doesn't that mean the member's right is to bring to the floor, even if the executive committee is tabling something?
Yes. You can still bring it up on the floor if you want.
Okay. And if I were to get kickback from the commander on that, I should be able to fight that, correct? Basically,
once a motion, and Diane, welcome to chime in, support this, because we had this discussion at every Legion College class. Once a motion is made on the floor, it must be followed through.
Okay,
motion
so I'm
must
just
be
gonna give you an
entertained.
example.
Wait a second.
Oh,
Wait. The motion must be entertained by the commander. He has to acknowledge the motion is made. He must ask for a second. And then you go into discussion phase, and anything you want to talk about is in the discussion phase of it.
okay. A resolution was submitted on the floor and the commander tabled it on the floor and referred it to the executive committee. The executive committee had a chance to review it. They've tabled the resolution. So now can the member bring that resolution up in the meeting based on our bylaws that I don't have to have executive committee approval to have that discussion and let the membership vote on that resolution?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
just a side note, the commander doesn't have the authority to table anything.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a problem we run into, and it's even within my own district. Some commanders think they're absolute boss of the show, and they're not. They're there to. I consider a commander to be a facilitator. My job as a commander is to facilitate the success of my post or my district or whatever level I'm doing that job on. If I operate with that mindset, then I'm more apt to be successful what I'm doing.
Now, Mark, this is Jim.
Yeah.
Thanks. So in regards to referring to committee, that would be more appropriate if the vote is split. Would that be correct? Or can they, at any time during the meeting, can it be referred to committee if the chair feels there's insufficient information?
Diane?
And once again, the chair doesn't make any decisions in a meeting. So if something comes up at a meeting, all it takes is one person to refer to committee. And of course, it'll take a second. You have your discussion to discuss why you want to refer to committee, and the members vote. Regardless of what the executive committee says, regardless of what the commander says.
Diane, it's John Lucio. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you move something to a committee, doesn't it need to be 2/3?
No.
Okay, guys, we need to roll on. We're running late on time here, and I don't want to get too hung up on this. If you have any questions about it, contact me after the fact, and we'll get you an answer for you. But I need to move on. Hang on. Okay, duties of the officers: do what they say and say what they do. Finance officer. There used to be a provision in there that said that the finance officer was bonded by a mandatory bond to be purchased from the department. In 2019, we removed that provision. Reason why? The post had $300,000 to cover the bonding of the entire department of 400 and some odd posts. One bond claim was allowable up to $10,000. It would take 3 years of collecting the $10 membership, the $10 fee for that to recover one claim. In other words, they did not have the money to do it and able to do it. So you have to have, it would have taken about $3 million for them. And they're not going to let $3 million sit there. And the other thing too is a question of licensing and other complications. So bonding is now in the hands of the post. If you have some money, get some bonding. There's a instruction on the department website on the Constitution bylaws page that will give you a little bit of guidance on where to find bonding. But basically, you can look at your insurance companies and you can look online. You can check with the Better Business Bureau. It's not hard to find. At the time when I checked it, it was about $50 for $10,000 of bonding. So, and the reason why we made it an optional thing is because some posts don't have the amount of money to be able to do that, and they really don't need the bond. So that's why we said responsibility of handling. Now, if you're gonna put it in your bylaws, and you can afford it, it shall be bonded, not should. Okay. Annual dues for this post shall be not less than the combined amount of department and national per capita dues payable, and so on and so forth. The amount is recommended by the executive committee, being read at 2 meetings, and then you vote on it at a regular meeting. It only takes a simple majority of vote for those present and voting to change the dues. You need to do it early because there's a report, post report that goes in. I don't think it's a CPR, but one of the running reports requires that you have to put in the amount of dues for the upcoming year. And we just have
a report.
Mark, it's the post report, post data report, and that's due April 15th.
It's been changed to 10th by national.
That has not propagated down to the department website yet, I don't think.
Okay, now, starting with the membership year 2025, National has instigated a $5 increase. Department is looking at the possibility, the soonest they can do would be the membership year of 2026. So remember your bylaw, you have to have dues that covers those things. My post bylaws say that as all is in there plus five additional dollars at a minimum. So you can take it up a little bit if you want to, you know, if you need to get some extra money from your dues. Appointments. This is appointments. This is where the permanent committees, such as finance and membership committees, are identified. If you're going to have a permanent committee on your post, this should be mentioned in this section. If you have a committee that may come or go, then I wouldn't put it in here, because once you put it in your bylaws, you got to make it a reasonable attempt to fill the committee and have them function. And the commander makes the appointments to the committee and the chairperson of the committee. And again, if you wish, you could have the executive committee make it subject to approval of the executive committee. I would only do that if you had a really large post or a real good reason for doing that. So your current most of your current bylaws, the audit section is in this section for appointments. So it's gone. It's moved up to finance. Limitations and liability. The post shall not incur nor cause to be incurred any liability obligation, whatever shall be subject to liability. Basically, you cannot make your post have an obligation to another entity. So you cannot establish a partnership with another organization, company, or entity that will require you to pay their debts. This statement is there to protect it. It's in the department bylaws. You can do something in conjunction with, but doesn't require you to pay their debts if they go falter on a contract. Administrative hearings. A lot of most of the bylaws, well, a lot of them now say the department trial manual. It's no longer department trial manual, it's the administrative hearing manual. National bylaws say that the post shall be responsible for the discipline of their individual members. There are some circumstances which the department may discipline an individual member, but by and large, it's the individual post that does this. The only thing you really need to put in your bylaws is that membership will be disciplined in accordance with the administrative hearing manual, period. You don't want to put a bunch of process in there, because if you put something that is not in the administrative hearing manual and the appeal process, they may get that turned over. So the more you stay away from it. And if you're thinking of if somebody's gonna get in trouble, and it's usually for major infractions, just because somebody got sassy with somebody else, I wouldn't haul them off to a trial unless they have a habit of doing it, but that's up to your post. But I would read that thing through at least twice before you even do anything to anybody, because it is a little bit complicated, or I should say challenging. Whatever you do, that if you go through that process of that manual and you convict somebody of something, they have the right to appeal to the department DEC. Somebody needs to mute their microphone out there. They have the right to appeal it to the department DEC. The DEC will not determine whether or not a guilty verdict was appropriate. What they will determine is whether or not the proper process was followed. That's what the purpose of the appeal is. So if the process was not violated, they're not going to overturn it.
Mark, you have a hand.
Yes.
Chris. And
You're
Ramirez
muted, sir.
need to mute itself.
Sorry about that. This is Chris again. Should we have something in our standing rules or house rules or whatever saying these are some of the infractions that the members may occur? If you badmouth or hit something, you've got 30 days. Stuff like that.
By all means, and those things belong in, as you said, in house rules. Some
Okay.
people want to load their bylaws with them. I wouldn't do that. Those things belong in the house rules. House rules can be a standard of conduct. They can be particulars about how meetings are conducted or when your meetings are conducted. There's several things you can put in the house rules, but the minutia stuff belongs over there in the house rules. So,
All right, thank you.
mhm. Anyway, you should review it. One thing that came up a couple of years back, we passed it. The thing that there was a situation about 3 or 4 years ago, an individual got in a lot of trouble. Actually, there was about 3 situations where an individual got in trouble, and they transferred posts before the post could do anything to them. Because of that rule, and the national says the local post should be responsible for discipline. They simply changed posts. 3 years ago in Texas at the national convention, I talked to somebody from Texas, and they put something in their bylaws. I can't remember what it was, but we came up with an idea. We put in our bylaws that members who have had an action initiated under the administrative hearing manual cannot transfer to another post until the action is resolved. So if you've initiated an action, and then the action initiation is anything that's in that hearing manual that's part of it, starting with a formal complaint being filed that is feasible for them to follow through with, you can freeze that person from transferring out of the post. And I'll tell you what, there's been a little bit of quieting of the rumbles around the department since I went in. Recall provisions. There's nothing that guides what system you use for recalls. There's something in the bylaws, there's a thing there, it is a system. If you have something better, you can certainly put it in there. But I don't think Robert rules have a whole lot on recalls of officers. But one thing you want to do is when you deal with statistics such as percentage of number of signatures required, be very careful to have enough signatures when they have to be serious about it, but not so many that it can't be done. And recalls should not be done for light reasons. Although it is a prerogative of the post to do that. Bylaws changes amendments. If you do an amendment to your bylaws, it basically follows the same process as a bylaw. If you're doing new bylaws, there's a sample, there's an instruction manual on doing amendments or changes to your post bylaws. If you want to do a change, you don't have to redo them every time. And the one thing I'm going to mention at this point too is when there's a change in Department of National Bylaws, you have 60 days after the close of the national bylaws to make that change in your post bylaw. A lot of people don't do that. Even if it's a department change, the clock starts at 60 days past the national convention. That is done automatically. It does not require a vote. And of course, we pick up a lot of that stuff when we review older bylaws on posts that when they've rewritten their bylaws and they send them in, they may have some outdated material in. And we'll let them know that with those things being mandatory, you don't have to have 2 readings of meetings if it's a mandatory change you have to do. They just need to do it. Certification page. This is also a critical thing that sometimes gets overlooked. Somebody needs to mute themselves. There's an awful lot of noise coming over.
That's Ramirez.
Artemio, could you mute yourself? Okay, here, I'll take care of that. Okay, I got it. Okay, make sure that certification page at the bottom is filled out. Fill it out truthfully. I've had a couple of times where I got people send me bylaws in and they certified the bylaws were read and approved at a meeting that hasn't happened yet. A little bit ahead of the gun. We'll take care of it. No. You need 2 readings at 2 separate months. You only need to read the things that are changing in the bylaws. You don't need to read the whole thing if you don't want to. You must fill it out, put the dates in and the date of approval, even if it's the same date as the second reading, which most cases it is, you still have to identify that. And as far as the signature, and then it takes a signature of the adjutant and the commander. Please don't have all the officers or the judge advocate sign the bylaws submission to the department. There's no need for that. They don't need to be there. Just the adjutant and the commander, or the commander and adjutant. What you can do is you can type their names on the signature line. Put it on top of the signature line, not below. But we'll take it. But try to put it up there. That's the same as signing it as far as, because you're certifying when you send that to us and you type their names in there, you're saying that that person certifies that those bylaws were read at 2 meetings and were passed. Bylaws, when you pass them, they go into temporary effect. An amendment when you pass goes into temporary effect immediately after it's passed. Temporary. If it's sent to the commission and we say that's not a viable bylaw, then it's no longer in effect. Again, we have a standard criteria used. We're not doing personal judgments. And we try to review them in a timely fashion. That doesn't always happen. But once we say, no, that's not proper, you can't do that thing anymore. But once we approve the bylaws for entering to the record of the department, we put it in there, boom, they're done. They're set in cement. And it takes the process being repeated in order to change it back to whatever it was if you want to. Are there any questions about the certification page? Submitting to department for approval. You need to either scan them or send them in PDF. Actually, you need to send them in either PDF or Word format. Please don't use JPEG, PNG, or anything similar to it. I can convert JPEG over pretty easy. PNG is a little bit more challenging, but those formats kind of screw things up on the way that it's put together and its spacing and the format of the document when we convert it. So we need it in either JPEG or Word. And the nice thing is if you type the names in, you can send it to us in Word. Then we can make the corrections you need to make on the actual bylaws and send them back to you. So when you get them back, you can just make them and return them, and then you're done. This is the simple and easy part. The two things that makes it simple and work that you can get your done fast. The first thing is get it done by staying close to the sample bylaw. Only change those things that I gave you tonight that you can change. And this is going to be posted back online, this video. And to make those changes quickly when we send it back to you. So theoretically, you send me a set of I've taken and received a set of bylaws. An hour and a half later, I have them approved in the department, and that includes a change. It takes me about 45 minutes to go through a set of bylaws and read them. Other commissioners, it may take longer, but I've read like 200 sets of bylaws, so I know what to look for. And sometimes I still miss stuff. But I'll send it back to them, and they'll make the corrections and send it right back to me, and then we're done. And then you're on probation. Okay. Now, the one thing I'm going to say at this conjuncture is do them right. Don't do them fast. Do them right.
Hey, Mark, quick question.
Yeah.
So when you do them format, do you care if it's on legal paper, the paper that has the line on the left with the numbers, specific fonts, line spacing, etc.?
I'd keep it on standard 8x11. Mainly because if we need to print them, not everybody has a legal printer. Has printers that fit legal papers. If your district commander or somebody else needs to print them as a read, I mean, I'm saying you can't do it, but for the sake of simplicity and usability, I would say keep it on regular paper. There's no reason to put it on a court document.
Okay. And then do you care about fonts? You want specific fonts and line spacing?
12 or 14 point, New Times Roman or Arial. So New Times Roman
Thanks,
or
Mark.
Arial, and usually 12 or 14 point.
All right. Thank you.
Mark, one question for you, sir. If you send back a correction and if that correction changes the structure of the document itself, what is the process of that? Would you have to take that back to the body?
If it's a mandatory change, no.
No, that's not what I meant. If it's, say for instance, someone sends you a set of their bylaws.
Yeah.
And there's something in there that needs to be changed and it changes the structure of the intent of that, say, section. Would that have to go back to the body?
No. The thing is, the body doesn't have a choice whether or not to accept the bylaw change. If it's a mandatory change, it has to be done. What would be the point?
So you're saying if it's a mandatory by the commission?
It's mandatory by the department or national bylaws.
Okay.
We're not making value judgments on your bylaws. We might make a recommendation to you on something. If you're about to walk into a closet without a flashlight, yeah, we might say take a flashlight, and we may contact you, make a recommendation. Then you'd have to go through that two reading or at least one more reading process. But the thing is, most of the stuff we're going to change, most of the stuff that comes up has to do with Well, we want to have officers for 2 years. Well, you can only have them for 1 year. Well, our old bylaws say that we have to elect officers and term in department 20 days prior to convention. No, it's prior to June 1st. Those are
Gotcha.
the vast majority of the things we run into. Or somebody will just plain want to do something they cannot do because it's in conflict with the department bylaws.
Thank you, Mark.
And it's usually not a big thing when it happens when they're doing it. So, but either way, they're not. If it has to be changed, it has to be changed. So, we prefer to get these things in Word. We love it when we get them in Word. It makes it easier. Although Microsoft Word now can convert a lot of PDF files over to Word. Work with them. I do it all the time. But I have a special program where I can sandwich them together and try to send all the pages in one document. So once in a while, somebody will send me 10 pages and 10 different documents. And I have to take, and we have to put them together before we can review them, stuff like that. Make it easier for us because that makes it easier for you. We try to track them in a time, they are tracked and we try to do them in a timely view. That doesn't always happen. Mostly because if there's something that's inappropriate in the bylaw, we need to identify it before you go too far with it. That's the main reason for trying to track them, trying to do these things and get them back in a timely fashion. And when we send it back to you, we need it back in a timely fashion from you guys too. A lot of what we're waiting for, we have posts out there that have been waiting a year and a half to make a change to a bylaw that was mandatory. Not very many, but it does happen. So what we used to do is the post would mail them to the commissioner of that area. And their commissioner would review them and mail them back to the post if they had to make a change. And if not, and they had to send 3 copies, and one would go here and one would go to the department. And 2019, we transferred everything over to scanned everything over to digital. And that made it easier. So now that we do it all online. Now, if you don't have anybody has any computer knowledge in your post, well, obviously you wouldn't be here if you didn't, but we will allow them to be mailed in hard copy to the department, but the department's going to scan them and send them to us, and then we're going to work on them. Once they are put together, what'll happen is there's an improvement document that'll be on top of the bylaws, the department approval sheet, and you'll get a copy of that back, or you can find it online, because I usually once they're approved by the commission, I usually get them online within 2 days most times, and frequently within like 2 hours. But when you get it back, it will be in PDF format, but we still like to get it in Word. Okay. Bylaws must be renewed or updated every 5 to 7 years. I need to change that line. Whenever there's a mandatory change, you need to make the change, and you don't need to submit it to us. Just make the change. Most don't, but you can take and put an addendum on the back of your bylaws. It's the easiest way to do it, that this change was made in accordance with the department bylaw such and such. You can either correct your old ones or submit fresh ones. Well, again, don't send us your old ones and expect us to identify it for you. We really prefer not to do that. We will if we have to get them done.
Hey, Mark, quick question. So on
Yes.
the department page, our bylaws show on the main page 2023, but the actual signed copy is 2019. What's the correct date to go by for aging those bylaws?
What's on the approval sheet?
Okay, so it'd be 2019.
If the 2019 is the date on the approval sheet, and if you find that, send me an email, let me know what post it is,
Okay,
and I'll get that changed. But yeah, I went through, I've gone through a couple of times and try to catch up and compare those dates with the sheets and match them up with what's on the file document and what's on the department website. Okay, so once we get them and they're posted, once I approve them, I immediately turn around and I send them to department. And we have one person there that gets them, and she posts them in your file online in the computer. And then she updates the administrative compliance report. And I always tell them when I say, please enter this approved set of bylaws for post 88521 into the department record and update the administrative compliance report. And the individual that's doing it now is really good about doing that, keeping up with it. Whatever happens, guys, we're here to help you. Our purpose, we're a customer-oriented commission. Our purpose is to help you guys establish bylaws that will serve your post. That's what we're interested in, or anything else. So some key elements to remember is keep your bylaws simple. Use house rules for standing rules, standing orders, procedures. Establish procedure for businesses. Your bylaws are for your post. They're not for your bar. They're not for the they're not for the car wash out behind the gas station. They're not for those things. They're for your post and the function of an American Legion post. Those individual entities, especially if they're incorporated separately, need to have their own set of bylaws, rules, policies, and procedures. When you're ready to do your bylaws, the commander should appoint a committee. Most posts, 3 to 5 people will suffice. Real small ones can do 2. Allow for input from other people. If you think there's something that might be an issue, go to a meeting and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? What do you want in your bylaws? Don't be afraid to ask people what they want in their bylaws. If it's not in conflict, then you can do that. So if you need help, you can reach out to your post judge advocate, district judge advocate, or your area commissioner, where all of us are here. If anybody runs into a roadblock with getting assistance from somebody, you can always call me. I will do what I can. When a new set of officers takes over the post, or even if it's the old officer in a new election year and you go into a new year for the fiscal year for the officers, first thing you ought to do is sit down and talk about your bylaws, or have everybody read the bylaws and become familiar with them. That'll save you some grief and heartache later on, especially when you try to cite something that's not in your bylaws as being in them. And again, they're always available online for access. So if you're a district commander and you have a post that's not doing well, the first thing you want to do is check their bylaws and see what they're doing and compare them to those.
Hey, Mark, John Lucio again. Another question.
Yes.
So if you want to incorporate conflict of interest and ethics, having the officers sign such forms, would that be a good idea to include that in the bylaws? Or I'm thinking more like the house rules. Now, sadly, I don't think our post has any house rules. If I want to look at some house rules to kind of get a best of class type of thing, how would I do that?
House rules are good. If something is really hardcore necessary, you can put it in there. But a good way to go is with the house rules. As far as ethics go, that's a real tricky one. Because then you're establishing a code of conduct for people to follow. Now, your house rules should establish the code of conduct, but to use generalized term is not a good thing, because then you make it something subjective to somebody's opinion, and whether or not something is appropriate or inappropriate. So that's kind of a hard one to travel. I've ran into 2 posts that have a lot of stuff in their bylaws and believe me, it's complicated for them to do that, because it just takes one person that has a different idea about what a code of conduct ought to be compared to somebody else. And somebody brought up with the condition where there's a person identified on a certain list that can we boot them out? If they're a member and they're behaving themselves and they're acting in a good fashion, they're conducting their business well, they wear their Legion hat to Legion functions, especially post meetings. They're not causing a problem. They're not posting a bunch of crap on Facebook demeaning the American Legion or our way of life. Those things, then generally you want to leave them alone. But I wouldn't get overboard with it.
To the person that asked the question, I just put my email in the chat. So if you email me and let me know that you're looking for a sample set of house rules, I'll send you my posts.
Okay, guys, this is the point where you can ask any question you want, as long as it's not about me personally. Yes, sir.
Quick question.
Michael.
Is the adjutant, which Michael? Me?
Korchak, you, sir.
If the adjutant and the sergeant of arms elected positions are appointed.
It's up to what you want your post to have it. Some posts feel like they want it to be appointed. Most are appointed. There are a few out there that do have the adjutant elected. But the idea, and a lot of people would prefer to have the commander appoint the adjutant for one simple reason. They
Yeah,
need to have, the commander has to have somebody with him that can work with him.
right. That's what we have right
People-
now.
Two people get along, it's gotta be the adjutant and the commander.
What about the sergeant of arms? Is he an elected position?
Whatever it says, whatever you want it to say. The only mandatory thing is the commanders and the executive committee members must be elected. Anything else is open to election, or as long as you state it in your bylaws.
Okay. Thank you.
Next question.
Question. Hey, would it be possible for you to send the slideshow to the people that are logged onto this session? To email it to us?
I have recorded this, or I am recording this, and it'll be posted online, so people will be able to access it.
Well, but I don't want the hour-long video. I'm just looking for the slides.
Oh, for the slide, I can post the PowerPoint, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, guys, that's just about it. I'm gonna shut off the recording here. Give me just a second.